She sat like a mountain in silk, still, strong, and quietly unshakable. Her navy suit hugged her frame with intention, her posture was impeccable, and her silence was not submission. It was control. In the plush stillness of first class, her presence was magnetic, yet deliberately ignored. When the stewardess rolled the meal cart down the aisle, she paused at every seat, smiling, serving, joking with the men in tailored suits until she reached her. Then, without a glance, the tray rolled right past. She said nothing. Not yet. The men across from her chuckled under their breath, the kind of laughter that needs no punchline. And when she did get noticed, it came with a condescending smirk. "You'll get yours when we're done with the real guests." Still, no reaction. Just a slow reach for her phone. The untouched meal in front of her wasn't just food, it was a test. And she had already passed. Before we reveal who she really is and what happens when the plane lands, tell us where you're watching from. Because this story proves silence can hold more power than noise. Amira Cole sat in seat 1A with the poise of someone who had long mastered the art of restraint. Her tailored navy suit spoke for her before she said a word. Clean lines, crisp collar, no need for embellishment. She didn't wear her success loudly, but it lingered in the way she moved, the way she observed, and most of all, in the way she chose silence over spectacle. As the cabin doors closed, the first-class section settled into soft murmurs and clinks of crystal. Around her, the air was thick with subtle privilege, polished shoes, forced smiles, and quiet hierarchy. Across the aisle, a cluster of suited men laughed over bourbon, glancing her way with amused confusion, the kind of glance that asked, "Are you lost?" Tara, the lead flight attendant, approached with a practiced grin that dimmed as soon as she turned to Amira. "Can I see your boarding pass again?" she asked, polite in tone, dismissive in intent. Amira didn't flinch. She held the attendant's gaze and replied coolly, "Still in seat 1A, still black." Tara chuckled awkwardly and moved on, but Amira could already feel the message behind the smile. She'd seen it before. Kindness reserved for the familiar, courtesy rationed based on assumption. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The men around her were served swiftly, meals, drinks, banter. When the cart rolled past her a second time, Amira didn't raise her voice or her hand. She just watched. Her silence wasn't hesitation. It was calculation. She was taking notes, not on paper, but in the calm precision of someone who knew that real power doesn't need to announce itself. That seat number 1A wasn't just printed on her boarding pass. It was a statement, undeniable, immutable. And every time someone looked confused, it echoed louder. She wasn't there to make a scene, but she was documenting every scene made around her. And by the time this flight landed, someone else's world would be taking off in a very different direction. The dinner service began with the gentle clinking of silverware and soft rustle of linen napkins. The men in seats 1B through 3C were already toasting to closed deals and stock surges, their plates gleaming with herb-crusted salmon, fresh rolls, and red wine. The scent drifted across the aisle like invitation, but it never stopped at seat 1A. Amira remained still, her hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. Tara passed her by once, then again. No glance, no explanation. Privilege, Amira thought, passes in whispers, but disrespect always lands with weight. The others noticed. Of course they did. But none spoke. Not the businessman beside her, not the one chuckling 2 rows back. The silence in the cabin wasn't peace. It was complicity. Tara finally paused beside her row, holding a tray with the last plated dinner. "We're out of the premium option," she said with a tone too casual to be innocent. "You can have a snack box instead." Her smile was tight, rehearsed. Amira tilted her head, gaze cool. "And you think that's appropriate for seat 1A?" she asked. Tara's eyes darted for a moment, but her smirk returned just as fast. "It's what's left," she replied, placing a sealed snack box and a lukewarm bottle of water in front of Amira as though doing her a favor. The tray sat between them like a challenge, but Amira didn't touch it. What she had been denied wasn't food. It was recognition, validation, the unspoken permission to belong in a space people still assumed wasn't hers. She picked up her phone, not to complain, not to escalate, but to act. A few taps. One short message, sent to a single contact. No names, no drama, just precision. "I'll handle this after landing." Tara turned and walked off without another word, glancing back once with a smug flick of the eyes. She still had no idea who she had just crossed, no idea what seat 1A truly meant. Not just first class, not just a ticket, but authority, patience, and the calm before a very calculated storm. When the wheels touched down and the plane taxied to the gate, Amira remained seated, her tray still untouched, her phone resting silently in her lap. She hadn't uttered a single complaint the entire flight. Not when she was ignored. Not when Tara offered her a snack box meant for standby passengers. Not even when the crew passed her seat a third time without so much as a nod. She had simply watched, remembered, and waited. As passengers unbuckled and gathered their bags, a subtle ripple passed through the cabin. Outside the window, 2 black SUVs pulled up beside the plane. Unusual, unmissable. A murmur of confusion rose among the crew. Tara stiffened, glancing at her co-workers, her confidence thinning. The captain's voice crackled awkwardly over the intercom, asking the crew to remain on board temporarily. Moments later, an airport official stepped into first class, flanked by security. "Miss Cole has requested a meeting." "Now," he said, eyes scanning the flight attendants. "All of you, and bring the captain, too." Amira stood with quiet purpose, adjusting the sleeve of her blazer. She rose not like a storm, but like a verdict, calm, composed, and completely in control. Tara's smirk from earlier was gone now, replaced by uncertainty. In the private conference room adjacent to the gate, the flight crew stood lined up, nervous, whispering. The captain fumbled with his epaulets. Tara kept glancing at the door, as if waiting for someone to speak on her behalf. Then Amira walked in. No press, no drama, just presence. She placed her phone on the table and folded her hands. "I'm not here to complain," she said, voice even. "I'm here to restructure." The room fell still. No one knew what she meant yet. "I'm Amira Cole," she continued, "CEO of Cole Global and board advisor to this airline's parent company. And what happened on this flight was not just a breach of hospitality. It was a failure of leadership." Tara looked as though the air had been knocked from her lungs. "You assumed my silence meant weakness," Amira said, her gaze unblinking. "You assumed that a woman in 1A, who didn't look like you, didn't belong. You assumed wrong." She tapped her phone once, unlocking recordings. Clear audio. Voices. Dismissive tones. Proof. But she didn't need to press play. "I won't be reviewing your actions as a customer," she said, turning toward the airline representative now seated across from her. "I'll be reviewing them as an executive." There was nothing left to say. Her phone had not been used for scrolling. It had been used for commanding. Quietly, completely. As the crew stood frozen, she stood taller than ever. She wasn't there to seek apologies. She was there to rewrite the rules that allowed this to happen at all. And as she turned to leave, she delivered her final line with effortless clarity. This isn't retaliation. This is reform. And it begins today. The quiet in the room was absolute. No one dared speak. Not the captain, not the flight attendants, not even Tara, who now stood pale, her arms folded but trembling at the elbows. The same woman they had dismissed for a missing meal was now seated across from them, not just in authority, but in command. Amira's phone rested on the table between them like a loaded verdict. With one swipe, she opened the voice recordings, cold, crisp, irrefutable. Tara's voice played back first. "We're out of the premium option. You can have a snack box." Laughter followed, then silence, then Amira's calm response. "And you think that's appropriate for Seat 1A? Poised and unflinching, Amira let the silence settle after the audio stopped. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You treated me like less," she said finally, each word deliberate. "Now, I'll show you what less costs." Around her, the crew's confidence drained like air from a pressurized cabin. The realization hit hard and fast. Not only was she the woman they had dismissed mid-flight, but she was also a board member of the very airline that issued their paychecks. She had the power not only to file a complaint but to change policies, terminate contracts, and restructure departments. The woman denied a tray, Amira thought to herself, held the power to ground the plane. Her blazer, once seen by Tara as just another corporate costume, now commanded the full weight of corporate governance. The buttons, the stitching, the subtle gold pin on her lapel, symbols of who she was the entire time. But Amira wasn't there to make an example. She was there to make a correction, a permanent one. "I'm not here to humiliate you," she added, her tone soft but resolute. "I'm here to ensure this doesn't happen again, to anyone. Ever." Then, she turned to the airline representative who stood by the door, nervously flipping pages on a clipboard. "Document this meeting. Effective immediately," she said, nodding toward the crew. "This flight team is relieved of duty. HR will follow up, but they will not fly again under this brand." Gasps filled the air. A stammered objection tried to rise from Tara's lips, but Amira was already standing. The moment had ended. There was no celebration, no press conference, just consequence. Amira walked out, leaving behind silence, stunned expressions, and a new standard. She hadn't come to punish out of ego. She had come to correct with purpose. A week later, the story had traveled farther than the flight itself. News outlets replayed the footage of black SUVs pulling up beside the aircraft. Anonymous tips had leaked the details about the CEO, the fired crew, and the quiet woman in Seat 1A who had said almost nothing, but had changed everything. But Amira didn't do interviews. Not really. When one reporter finally caught up with her at a leadership summit, they asked the question burning on everyone's mind. Why didn't you expose them earlier? Amira looked at the reporter, unbothered. "I wasn't trying to go viral," she said. "I was trying to be heard." That was the difference. She hadn't posted the video. She hadn't called the media. She had called the board. And instead of outrage, she had orchestrated action. She rewrote the airline's training protocols from the inside out, starting with mandatory bias education for all flight staff, from gate agents to pilots. She implemented a program called Altitude Respect, one that didn't just include anti-discrimination modules, but trained crews to recognize how subtle slights, skipped service, skeptical stares, repeated seat checks, can carry the weight of 1,000 insults. She didn't scream, one airline executive later said. She rewrote the altitude of expectation. Still, the public reaction was split. Social media erupted in support. Hashtag Seat1A trended worldwide. But others, as expected, protested her decision. Too harsh, some claimed. Overreaction, others said. Amira read the headlines but never responded. She had never done this for their applause or their approval. At her next flight, she boarded quietly. This time no one asked for her boarding pass twice. No one passed her over. But it wasn't that moment that stayed with her. It was a photo she received a few days later. An internal memo had passed through the airline showing a young black woman seated in 1A, poised, wide-eyed, surprised, her meal tray in front of her. A handwritten note beside it read, "With respect, from the skies to the soul." That was the justice Amira believed in, not punishment shouted from podiums, correction made at altitude. She hadn't just responded to one incident, she had shifted a culture, quietly, permanently. In her office, tucked beside her framed board credentials, sat something even more personal. The original meal tray tag from her flight. Never used, never served. A symbol of what was denied, and what she made sure would never be denied again. Because justice, Amira knew, didn't always make headlines. But when done right, it always lands. Amira boarded her next flight the same way she always had. Calm, composed, carrying nothing but a briefcase and the weight of every woman who came before her. But this time, something was different. The nods were subtle, the greetings sincere. No second glances at her seat number. No veiled questions about her boarding pass. Just recognition, not out of fear, not out of performance, but out of respect. She took her place in seat 1A again, where a meal tray was already being prepared with care. No announcements were made, no apologies whispered. She didn't need them. She ate quietly, peacefully, and for once, the silence didn't feel like dismissal. It felt like acknowledgement. She gazed out the window, reflecting on what had changed, not just for her, but for the system behind her. Back at corporate headquarters, a new plaque had gone up. Ethics in Service, Chair Amira Cole. Her name, engraved beneath it, wasn't just a title. It was a reminder that real leadership doesn't demand the spotlight. It rewrites the rules. Have you ever been judged by your seat instead of your worth? Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not react, but rebuild. If this story hit home, share it with someone who's ever been underestimated. Would you have stayed quiet or done what Amira did? Follow us for more stories where dignity takes flight and lands with justice.